Hey, everybody. I am, listen, I am blessed. Some of my friends and my people would say, I'm blessed and highly favored. I don't quite know what that means, although I kind of know what that means. It's a greeting to say, listen, all is well. It's a confession and profession of both faith. And I would say there's a little bit of uptick of a positive nature on board. Listen, I'm John Seldis, and this is the platform that has been able to offer, for at least me, the opportunity to spend time talking to my friends, colleagues, folk that I think are pretty important people who got something to say. And I get to have the conversation with them. This is Relevant Conversations with yours truly, me, Bishop John Seldis. And tonight is no exception. We will be here chopping it up a little bit with our brother and friend. And let me introduce him this way. He's been no stranger to our platform and our shows. This is what I'll say. You know, when you meet some folk and you go like, yeah, we related. I may not be by blood, might not. Our people may be on down the line a little bit, but there's some kinship there that you know and you recognize. And this brother, when I heard his voice and heard his thinking and his opinions, sometime fairly long before I actually got to know who he was and got to meet him. And you know, when you meet some people and their hype doesn't quite live up to what's real. Well, this brother is just the opposite. The hype is true to who I have known him to be. And he is a trusted friend. And every now and then when he and I he'll call me or I'll call him, say, did you hear? Did you see? And you know, we commiserate around reality and help, you know, just helps the load a little bit. Let me bring to this platform. He is a professor at the University of Hartford. He's associate professor for political and government, and he's a social scientist, political scientist. You know, one of them people that you want to have read, and when they talk, they posit some stuff that you ain't never thought about because they done read a whole bunch of people, and they have been in thought and they've been in process for a while. Let me bring to this platform my brother and friend, Dr. Bilal Sekou. Come on and greet the peoples, if you will, sir.
How's it going? How's it going? How's it going, my brother? The last time I was on here, you had like a stack of books. You were going through the books. You were throwing all these ideas out at me. So I had to ask you, like, I needed to be prepared for this evening. I just can't come here half stepping. I gotta be prepared. I don't want my clock clean. So I'm just letting you know I'm coming ready tonight.
Listen, that stack of books is still there is a stack of books it's right over here. But listen. I'm always around a bunch of books. So you and I had we've had a couple of conversations in I would say in recent weeks. One in particular when and I want to start here because I think this is related to a number of things that I'd like to cover in these next few minutes as we're talking. Um, Woke up one morning, and I like to think I'm relatively aware of what's happening, around me, right? What's going on in the culture. I'd like to think I'm relatively informed about the news of the day, what's going on, in my community or in my city, in the state. We live here in Connecticut, and so pretty connected. And I've been able to visit with a couple of people, a few folk who do things around here, and so you and I both have some kind of access. It's one of the reasons I like Connecticut is that it's a small state, and you can have access to stuff, access to people and
Right,
things.
right.
Um, you know, we live fairly, within a few hours, we can jump on a plane and be in the nation's capital. So I'd like to think that we got a little access there. You know what's going on. I woke up one morning, we was dropping bombs. We was at war, and I didn't. I felt like, well, what has happened? There was no conversation. There was no. Well, let me say this. I wasn't aware of the conversation. I'm sure there were conversations going on, but all of a sudden, without very little or limited warning, we were dropping bombs on Iran,
Right.
and 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 so I was thrown off a little bit. What about you, brother? What?
I'm still thrown off by this war because I can't figure out why we're at war, to be honest, other than perhaps oil or in the deepest, darkest corners of their minds, they're fighting a holy war in the Middle East. If you listen to what Pete Hegseth says, you look at the way Donald Trump talks about himself, the way some evangelicals talk to them, about them, you get the impression that they are fighting some kind of holy war in the Middle East. But we can talk about that later as well. But like you, I woke up, shocked. I mean, and this president over the last year and a half almost has done a lot of that, right? You wake up and you're shocked by some of the things you see happen. What was amazing about this moment was that the State of the Union address, there was no discussion about any kind of war on Iran, no explanation of why this is in America's vital interest to do this, what the goal would be. I mean, all of that. I think he spent maybe 5 minutes in total talking about Iran. And then shortly after that, we get this invasion. We get about 10 explanations for why they're doing it. None of them seems justifiable. This is a war of choice that the president has taken the country into, along with Israel. And we are now dealing with the consequences of this thoughtless act on their part, to take the country to war. And of course, we saw, innocent children be killed, about 150 of them. And that's on us, on our country, on us for picking this president and putting him in power.
Yeah, and it was very similar. We didn't not too many days before this war that was, declared on Iran, we went in somebody else's country and I'm saying we, and I'm really trying to push back from that we table. I don't know who the we is because that ain't me. But anyway, I'm gonna say the United States government went in somebody else's country overnight, and their president and first lady, we just abduct them,
Kidnap.
kidnap. We just go in. Well, that's some thugation, in my opinion. That's some you thugging good. You roll up in somebody else's spot and then take them and then bring them to your spot and say, we putting you on trial here because you done broke our law. This is a leader of another nation. It was similar in that kind of way. Like, I don't know what's going on. And you're so much smarter than me, for sure. This whole kind of political stuff, this your stuff. Okay. But I feel like I'm a little bit of a student of history. I ain't never seen anything like this before.
Right.
And I don't know if we have ever seen a leader, certainly here in the United States, that has this kind of, that moves like this. What I don't know what to call this other than what some of us been calling it, right?
We probably haven't seen this kind of imperial activity on the part of America since the late 1800s. Cuba, the Philippines. I mean, so this isn't unprecedented for America to do this, right? I think what we saw was a build up to that moment, right? Think about the people who were in boats that were blown up by the US government. So he built to this moment where he went in and kidnapped the president and the first lady of Venezuela. And not only that, then he extorts the country and demands a cut of the profits from oil sales. This is gangster activity, right? That's what gangsters do, right? They say, we'll let you operate if you let me wet my beak, right? That's what gangsters do. And so this president operates like a gangster. He thinks like a gangster, right? You go into someone else, as you said, someone else's house, you kidnap them from their house, and then you require the remaining people, the family that's still in the house, to pay you an extortion to be able to continue to exist with the threat of the gunboat. And he's still killing people in not only around the Caribbean, but also even in the Pacific Ocean. They're killing people. And they're making these arguments that we're trying to prevent drugs that were not coming to the United States, right? People forget about that part of the story. And so this was really about taking those resources. And so the deeper conversation is really about not only what happened in Venezuela, but also what's happening in Iran and the desire to control this vital resource, oil, because the world still depends on it. And the US wants to be a hegemon. They want to control all of that. When I say the US, this president wants to, because I don't own it either any more than you do. But certainly the people abroad, they don't go, Bishop Selders and Brother Sekou are not included when they say they. They say they mean all of us. So we're in this together, unfortunately.
That's not funny, and it is, because that's exactly what I struggle with, and I don't know, I've said this a number of times on these platforms, but I struggle with who is the we.
Yeah.
Right. I struggle with that. As you are, I'm in higher ed, so this conversation around, there's another name for it, but now these days we're talking about belonging. Right. It was diversity, equity, and inclusion, but now we're talking about community and belonging. Right. We've reframed and refashioned, and that's okay. I don't mind. And I'd like to argue, however, that when we go down this road, really people want to know if I'm missing, or if I don't show up when I'm expected to show up. do I matter enough for you to call me and check in on me and say, hey, bro, what's happening? Where you at? We was looking for you, right? People want that the sense of, am I missed if I'm not there, right? And I think, and I'm, I dabble in the religious a little bit. That one might think because of the title I go by in some settings. There's some, that might be important in an important discussion within the context of a religious community. What does it mean to have some kind of meaning and value within the context of community? I'm amazed as every day I wake up every morning, not just these mornings when we have declared war or something something has gone sideways, and you're right. We did there was a kind of a drumbeat toward the Venezuela incident, right? Nobody, I didn't hear it forecast that we was gonna go in and kidnap the president. I didn't get that, but there was a something. All right. While at the same time, every time there's something going on like that, I'm thinking, what is this big old shiny that they got us looking at? And I have to say, my beloved is the one that clues me in. She's always suggesting, if they got us looking at this shiny over here, what's happening over here? And don't put all your eye on this over here, because that's shiny. It's something else going on over here. And if any of us would just pause for a moment, there was a steady drumbeat around Epstein, and the linkages to those in high places, and the government, the cast of characters, and I'm not thrown off, or maybe I am, when the first lady of the country starts talking. She dropping jewels and pearls that she didn't know Epstein. And I thought she met her now current husband through. Okay. So, and boy, they might take me. Well, anyway, we covering some material that ain't regular that folk cover, because we've had presidents and folk in high places who have been engaged in some fairly interesting and nefarious stuff. All right, I'm not naive. Again, as a student of history a bit, there is stories to be told about the relationships of those who have served in the presidency and other high governmental offices, right? So there's stories to be told, and they do tell them, right? This one, in my opinion, all of them almost seem to just, when you compare what's happening now to any of these other stories, there seems to be just there ain't no cover to it. There used to be cover stories, right? We knew Bill Clinton was a womanizer. We knew it before he got elected, but they packaged it. It wasn't so blatant, right? Nobody talked about JFK and his philandering, or FDR. That just what, and again, I know it was a different day. We didn't have social media like we got today. We weren't able to tell stories in the way we are able to have access and tell stories. So, I mean, I think there is something that's driving it that's different.
Right. And we had Me Too. We had Me Too,
right? So you got all that going on, but there's something fairly blatant in Make America Great Again. And I asked the question when I first started hearing it, when was it great? And student history, didn't we hear this You know, in the late 19th century, this "Make America Great" phrase, wasn't it used? And
America,
when was it used?
yeah.
Right? And how was it used in during the Reconstruction era? And of course, when we're talking Reconstruction, you're talking black people getting pushed out again after getting just some modicum of restitution, right? So it's a very interesting time. I struggle with, and here's one more piece. This political stuff for you, in particular. I'm glad I got you on here so you can give me some opinions about this. This other piece around this presidency is that you remember the economy was gonna get back on track. There was gonna be something. The economy was gonna start working again for the folk, and the tariffs started being introduced into this, and boy, have we got ourselves off into something that we haven't quite seen in a century, quite frankly, right? You know, when tariffs were being used in the way that they are touting it to be used, we're talking about World War One era tariff making. So I know I threw out about 3 or 4 things there for you to.
More than 3 or 4, but I work with you on this. More than 3 or 4, but I work with you on this. Couple things come to mind, right? And I think it's important to understand, in many ways, Epstein and the Epstein files, right, helped Donald Trump get elected to office, right? It helped him get elected to office because for that MAGA base, his supporters, that MAGA base supporters, the Epstein file was about tracking down people who had been victimized by people like Bill Clinton and the Democrats, right? So there was this idea that this would really expose, right, this deep state. This, you got to connect it to QAnon and all of the other conspiracy theories. This is a part of that sort of larger narrative of conspiracy theories that, really plays big in that MAGA movement, right? And what happened was Bondi and a few others went through those files and they found out that Donald Trump was all over them. And they realized this is not a Democrat conspiracy. Exactly. They went, oops, and they went into him and they said, you're all over it. And his next statement was, all right, then, nothing there, nothing to see, right? And then all of a sudden, he didn't want to talk about it. And parts of MAGA got really upset, and that's part of his problem, right? But I think the other part, if that had not happened, some of the things we see going on, right? The Epstein, to me, the Epstein is the distraction from the larger project, the project of white Christian nationalism, the project of imperialism, right? The project of mass deportation, the project that Doge engaged in, right? Those were the things they were going to do. And they were going to do it with a kind of avalanche, right, of things happening at the same time, so that you and I wake up one morning and we're like, oh, wait, Doge, oh, wait a minute, hold on. Imperialists, wait a minute, wait, I can't keep up with this. What's going on? And your phone's constantly beeping. You're waking up in the middle of the night sometimes looking and going, what the hell just happened, right? And that's how we feel right now, right? And that's, again, very intentional on their part, because you don't know where to fight. You don't know which battle to wage, right? You don't know, because we're looking at people on the global level who are being denied HIV medication, who are being denied nutrition and food and are dying, right? So we can be focused on that. We can be focused on what's happening in Gaza and Lebanon. That can pull our attention. We can be pulled in the direction of, what's going on with this white Christian national project. There's really a global project, right? It's a global project with Hungary. It's a global project with Russia. It's a global project with Le Pen in France, right? All of these folks are talking to each other and strategizing together to go move us to a post-liberal world order, right? in which might is right, right? And in which Black and brown people are relegated to a status of either dependency or non-existence, because this is a project that its ultimate aim is not to include us, but to eliminate us, to move us off the chessboard, right? And so it's hard to keep up with that. It's hard to keep up with all of these things that are going on. And I've only touched the surface of some of the big items, but there's so many other things that are going on. We look at Doge and the attacks on healthcare, education, the Department of Education. I mean, we are being hit with so much that it's really overwhelming, right? To really deal with and also to be able to respond to. And that's very intentional because, again, you're on your heels trying to figure out, where do you fight? What do you do? And that's not including the fact that you still have the issues that you've been working on, for example, in Hartford, and police brutality and police violence and homelessness and housing and other kind of things, right? So when all that hits your plate, it's overwhelming. I feel overwhelmed. I don't know about you. You're cool and calm most of the time. So, but I feel overwhelmed right now.
I'm overwhelmed too. And what's you just made me remember the same picking apart of governmental agencies that went with, say, for example, the Department of Education. Mm-hmm. And for in that example, the Department of Education's main function was regulatory. Its main function was actually to make sure everything was copacetic. Right. It was the watchdog, for what went wrong or what could go wrong in state or local regions. The same thing is happening with the environmental work,
right?
And the passages of the laws that are happening there, slowly and pretty going by really without a whole lot of noise. People are being ousted. Whole organizations in that particular, the environmental arena, are being just X'd out. And the next thing, the Department of Ed compliance was the deal. We have in effect, the Department of Education as it was will never exist again.
Right.
It just it's gone. Right. Yeah. He takes down a third of the White House, East Wing, because he said he could. It's gone now. Now the battle in the court. The court said, "Wait a minute, hold up, wait a minute." It's gone.
To build a ballroom. A ballroom. You say the biggest ballroom in the world, attached to the White House.
Yeah, and bro, what they really did, they told us they were going to do this. Project 2025.
Yeah,
they wrote it in a book. If you read the book, you read down in the book, and they ain't even in the fine print. Some when you get them, you and I. Every now and then I'll read one of them old big thick books. You got 85,000 pages in it.
Normally you have to look at the bit, at the bibliography, to find all the details, right? Like the citations. But
that's right.
You're right. It's not in the fine print. It's right there.
It's right there. The headings of the chapters. I again, like you, a good book. Before I really buy it, I flip to the end. Mm-hmm. And I see, who did they cite, right? And that's important to me. Whoever the authors are, I want to know where they're getting their information, how they are forming their opinions about things, and that's important to me, right?
Yeah.
This ain't even that. And they were straight up with it. And next thing we turn around, and then I was hearing, and this was fascinating to me too. I was hearing the conversation in the neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I was hearing it differently than maybe I've heard it before. And part of that is that the candidate, we had the one who's now in charge, and we had a sister. And I was hearing like some folk was hearing, I was hearing a little bit of the pushback, a little bit of the stank face, and a little bit of the rolling of the eye. I mean, it was a vibe that when you interrogated, there's some things up under there that I found a bit disturbing. Right now, at the end of the day, they wanted to blame that Vice President Harris didn't get elected because Black people didn't vote for her. That's a lie. The vast majority of Black folk in the United States did vote for her.
Yeah.
90+% Black women voted, and over 80% of Black men voted for her. So that she didn't lose the election because Black folk didn't vote for her. Let's stop that lie, right? But she did lose, or he didn't win it. She didn't win the election because Black people didn't vote. But there is this, that huge number of folk who did not participate at all. Mm-hmm. Right? The participation of this election was huge numbers of folk, millions and millions and millions. 70 and 80 million people voting, so lots of participation, right?
Yeah.
So the narrative is strange, and then you got. So here we are, we in this moment, right? And so many of us, let me speak for me. I said, listen, I'm gonna have to check out of this national scene because I'm feeling, like you, overwhelmed, and I'm a little bit disappointed at the response of the other side, quite frankly. All right. And those that have been speaking very strongly seem not to have the juice to get it done. Right. You got AOC in the squad, one of my sisters, who I know from St. Louis, that's home for me. She loses her seat in St. Louis, Corey Bush. Mm-hmm. And she was rolling and hitting hard. And when she loses her seat, the squad, folk ain't rallying like I feel like they ought to. And here we are, folks slow walking, and ubba dubba dubba. And I feel like now, if I could put my spiritual hat on, I feel like, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood. Now I'm gonna start quoting Bible. Here we go. But against, spiritual wickedness in high places. I'm seeing some stuff really unfolding that I feel like I got to pay some attention to, while also not being fooled that the responsibility of how we gather ourselves and take care of each other has to start at home first, right? For this thing, we got to think about, ultimately, it's very little that we could do if we can't eat, we ain't got nowhere to live, or and Lord, we ain't got no income coming through. So there's lots of that, lots of those mechanisms and systems, while the federal government has lots to do with that, they come down through the states and into our cities and our locals, whether that's local towns and cities or counties. And so, I felt like I needed to turn my attention. Okay, let's look at how we're going to be able to make it and manage it. Go ahead, sir.
I was going to say, certainly one of the reasons why Republicans have been able to flex the way they're able to flex with power in this country is because they took serious state level politics, right? And they understood that the real action, right, is occurring at the state level. Right now, down at the Connecticut legislature, they are making decisions that have a huge impact on our daily lives here in the state of Connecticut. So I absolutely agree with you that turning local, right, and trying to be impactful and have those fights at the state level, because if you control the state legislature, you also control the redistricting process, which means you
Mm.
control the congressional seats in your state, which again, Republicans have been able to do, especially through partisan gerrymandering. But, and listening to you, and I've been feeling this way for a while, that if we are really going to prepare ourselves for this fight going forward, right? Because in many ways, we may be at the beginning of this fight once again, right? This stuff goes in cycles. You know, we take a few steps forward, and then we deal with that white backlash that tries to push us back, right? It's a tug of war that goes on, and it'll probably go on long past you and our time on this earth, right? But it makes me think about just the importance of organizing, right? The importance of meeting people where they're at, going out into community. So when you're in that barbershop and you're talking about that experience, and as you can tell, I haven't been in the barbershop in a while, but when you're in that barbershop and you're talking to those brothers, right, more of that needs to go on in our community. People need to be doing and having these conversations. Hell, we need reading groups in a lot of our communities, right? You and I read a lot of books, right? And a lot of other people read few, if any, books at all. But we need to find a way to help people begin to really see these things, especially the systemic nature of some of these issues that we confront in our community. And so the organizing and the work that needs to be done, meeting people where they're at, having those one-on-ones, meeting people, meeting with community groups, you know, meeting with our sort of faith leaders and getting people out into the community and engage and talking to people who we ordinarily don't talk to. We need to be talking to and organizing for work. And to me, that's a part of the other piece of this is community. And when you build that community, I mean, we think about those moments where Black politics, for example, has been at its best. It's been because there was a sense of community there, as well as the organizing piece that went on, that people felt a shared faith. They felt the need to come out there and to work together to try to transform their conditions. And they felt like they were a part of something that was bigger than themselves, but at the same time, they were a part of. And so we've got to figure out how to do that kind of work and to take it more seriously. Because on the one hand, while I certainly, you know, I'm a political scientist and I understand the importance of electoral politics, and I understand the importance of electing people, good people, to public office, but that can't be our only goal. You know, at the end of the day, we live in a country, and, you know, we were talking earlier about, you know, the Black vote and and how Black people overwhelmingly supported Kamala Harris. The problem was not even people who came to me and said things about, well, he got this percentage of the Latino male vote. No, he won this election because a majority of white people went out and voted for a psychopath, a narcissist, right? A person who shouldn't be anywhere near the White House and president of the country, who made promises he was not able to keep, who even in his first term campaigned as a populist but governed as an oligarch. And they pretended as if that didn't happen for 4 years. I mean, this guy stood up and wondered aloud about injecting bleach into your body to deal with COVID, right? This guy had to say, I am a stable genius. If you have to identify yourself as a stable genius, there's probably a problem there, right? And so this idea that he gets reelected, right? That 77 million Americans picked him over Kamala Harris, to me, still blows my mind, right? And she ran an incredible campaign in a very short period of time, right? And somehow to throw that weight on her about what she didn't do and she should have been out there more. At the end of the day, Donald Trump was unfit to be president. And anyone who voted for him knows deep down that he is unfit. And we see the proof of that right now, just how unfit he is, right? Because in between the wars, in between all the other stuff, we get the crazy stuff like the post that he put out today depicting himself as Jesus healing people. And then he comes back later and says, no, I thought that was me as a doctor. And I'm like, a doctor? That's what that image was? And then I thought to myself, maybe he's talking about, Trumpocles from the 6th century Athens, or maybe that's the doctor he's talking about from that rival city that rival Athens. Maybe that's what he's talking about. He saw himself in that role. But what I saw was a guy who put a picture out, an image of himself, an AI generated image of himself as being this kind of Messiah-like figure. And I think, unfortunately, there are a lot of people in our country who see him as a white Messiah. And we're in this mess because of that.
Going after the Pope. I don't. You can say what you want.
Yeah.
But the Holy See and the Pontiff. Yeah. And what in his commentary about the Pope, I didn't even know what he was talking about. I mean, I heard
the crime stuff.
I heard what? I don't know. No Pope is for they want to feed the people. They want the people to get. I mean, they walk a line, but it's about Catholic charities, for God's sake. I don't know what in the world. Anyway, so my blood pressure be going up, and then I get inarticulate.
But this Pope is definitely from Illinois and hung out in Chicago, because he essentially told Trump, I ain't scared.
Listen, that this is so gangster talk. Listen, gangster can talk to gangster, right? If you wanna roll like that.
Yeah,
so
I ain't scared.
Listen, there is. I am, in one sense, I'm appalled by all of it. Right. Mm-hmm. So there's in one, we're talking and having this discussion kind of widely about all of the shenanigans and foolishness. Right. And that's what I would call it. Mm-hmm. There's another part of me that when I'm in community, right, I'm watching our folk. Right. Mm-hmm. And at the end of all of the politicking, now I'm gonna speak a little ebonically. So you go, just hang with me for a minute. Hang on with me for a little. All the politicking, my people would say, when you get through talking, there's people at the end of them. And again, my beloved reminds me all the time, while we all in with, and she knows I like a little political intrigue. I like being all in the weeds of all of that. Mm-hmm. In all of our policy making, there are people at the end of it who at any given point end up suffering. And our brother Cornel West talks about, centering the voice of the suffering, right? That we've got to allow suffering and the folk who suffer to speak, to presence itself in ways that actually draw us into deeper discussion and dialogue, and ultimately, for me, doing whatever it is that we do from this center place. I would call it a moral center, where love is really at the core, and what I am witnessing, Lord have mercy. So let me just be clear. I'm not, suffering like buffering, but Lord have mercy, did I just put a whole lot of money in my gas tank?
Yeah.
Them egg prices, while they ain't where they were, they ain't come back. They ain't down. And I don't know about you, but my bill at the grocery store seem to still be increasing. I'm paying double and triple what we for the same. And that bag of grocery, I got $100 on it before I get out the door and it's got a half a bag and some in that. That's how much it costs. It's just the cost to do whatever it is to live here. Is remarkable, and at the end of it, with all of the machinations that are going on, our lives are worse in many ways. And I have some ability. And I'm thankful to the good God for that. And yet, I know where Boo Boo and Pookie and our folk in neighborhoods are really dealing. It's tough out here. It's hard out here. And I feel like, I don't just feel, I experience not far too few folk actually, making that important and somehow using that as impetus to do the work that we need to do. And I'm disappointed even at the state level and even in our local. For me, it was never quite so clear as to, a few weeks back here, phone calls were made to the Hartford Police Department. I live in Hartford, and calls were made saying, we got person out here. They are having a mental health challenge. So the police did not show up unawares of what the scenario and the scene was, right? And to have two brothers within a matter of just a bit of time dead at the hands of police after all of what we've been through from, in the last 12, 15 years, out of all we've been through.
Right.
And so that, a good deal of that, I've been out in these Connecticut streets across this state, lifting and raising my voice and organizing in and around police brutality in a way in which we gotta rein that in, to protect and serve. I take serious, and that didn't happen here in Hartford. And when we just put a little pressure on the mayor, he was talking out the side of his mouth for a minute. Finally, did make a move, only to have the union say the mayor is an idiot. And this was I don't know what you're talking about. Those shootings were legit shootings. And that there's something wrong. Again, that what I would call the moral center, something with something's still off to me, bro. Something's still off there.
I mean, and obviously, if you know anything about this history of policing in Black communities, it's not just the last 20 years. You can go back and read police newspaper stories from the 1890s and early 20th century, and you will see examples of Black men in particular, but Black women as well, who are murdered by the police. You think about lynchings that took place in the South. Often the police were cooperating, were part of these things. They were releasing people from prisons and turning them over to mobs who were there to lynch and to kill, those people. Watching that video and hearing family members pleading with the police not to shoot him, begging him to drop the knife that he had in his hand, and then realizing that this other officer newly arrived, and within several minutes, he's firing at this individual, right? And often people come back and they talk about, well, what we need is better training. What we need is, and they'll sort of run down the laundry list of things that have been tried and have not worked to prevent these kinds of things from happening. I mean, it points to, some sort of deeper questions about policing. It points to also deeper questions about the inadequacies of our mental health um, system. These are the kind of things that have come under attack by this president, funding for these kinds of programs coming into states that go through state governments that come from federal dollars to support those kind of programs. You were talking earlier about, and this is why I believe it's just so important to have those conversations with people in communities to understand, because like you, I'm relatively privileged. I started out in a welfare dependent household, but I'm now a middle class college professor, right? And though I'm feeling it at the grocery store as well, but I'm not feeling it like the 2 million people who've lost access to any kind of food assistance because of this president and what that creates and the kind of stress that creates, which contributes to mental health challenges that people are having because they're struggling every day just to survive. And
That's
so
right.
when we look at these things, we've got to put them in that sort of larger context of the attacks on the social safety net, the attacks on the things that sustain families and sustain individuals and provide people with the help they need to deal with some of these challenges like mental health, illness, and also food insecurity. I mean, all of these things, sort of come together. And when I see something like what I saw in that video, it just broke my heart to watch that, to see, how that played out, to know that those families are devastated now. They've lost people who were important parts of their lives. And you watch it and you have the sense that this just didn't have to happen this way, that
That's right.
things should have happened to prevent that moment from occurring. And those are the things we've got to try to figure out how to fix.
That's right. It's troubling for me, and it won't. This is where the sleepless nights come in, brother. That in many ways we've got to, the work I invested in, and not just me, dozens and dozens of us, and 5, 6, 7 years ago, as we tried to get a handle on, police accountability, police overreach, and the kind of coalesce law and get everything kind of packaged so that there is some layers of accountability for the reach of those who are sworn to protect and serve us, right? Um, the one question comes, what it wasn't the mental health of Stevie that
Mhm.
I'm questioning. It's the mental health of that officer and these officers that roll up on the scene and within a matter of just a little time,
Couple
9 minutes.
minutes at most. It's like a couple minutes before he starts shooting. Yeah,
He just loads, empties the clip
yeah,
in the brother Stephen. So there's something going on, and that the I appreciate our brothers and sisters, and let me shout out a number of them. Um, um, uh, Pastor AJ Johnson, and brother Andrew, and brother Calvin, and others. There are plenty of other folk who not only raised their voices, they got out there and knocked on doors and surveyed that community and got some. You and I, again, because of our relationship to higher education, little researcher, do you?
mm,
And you put some data to it, surveying 100 folk, and the vast majority of the folk thought, wait a minute, this was not right,
yeah,
right? And something ought to happen to the cop. We should not have police that serve us that don't care about us,
exactly. And I
right?
tell you that reaction by the head of the police union,
Hmm.
that's a scary guy, right?
Yeah,
And if
yeah,
that is a representation of other officers who are on that force. That's very troubling.
Yeah,
And
it's troubling.
it points to why these things are so difficult to solve, right?
Yeah.
Because if that's the attitude you bring to your work, I mean, he said that he was at war
We're at war.
with the city. We're at
That's
war.
right.
Who's he at war with?
With.
Right? Is he at war with Black and brown people on the north end and the south end of the city of Hartford? You know, because if he's going into this job with the warrior mentality, right? Then you're going to get certain kind of outcomes because he's not there to protect and serve.
No.
And so that still blows my mind. That those comments that he made in response to the officer being fired. Yeah.
This yeah. And this is, we got just a few more minutes, brother. And I really appreciate you spending a little bit of time chopping it up with me. This is where we got to dig deep and figure out what is ours to be involved in, what is your response to it. I mean, there are a number of us. We're gonna do what we do, right? I'm gonna keep doing what I do. Growing up in the Christian church, a couple of songs come to mind. I'm on the battlefield for the Lord, and I promised him I would serve him till I die. Right. So there's a kind of commitment that I come, I'm here to the end. But I'm also in the business of the best I can, cajoling those who may have not been willing to step out and do more or do something in addition, do that extra thing. Time is now to figure out what is it yours to do. I'm paying attention now again. I was my beloved again. Now we're in a conversation recently, and in St. Louis we had Black media, right? So we had several newspapers, and we had a couple of radio stations that was sure enough they was gonna play our music, and in the morning you was gonna get our brand of talk radio, right? And so I'm thinking about KATZ in St. Louis, 1600 on the AM dial, and WESL. Anybody looking at me now from St. Louis, y'all know these call letters, right? These were the places where we got our music, we got our news. What was happening in the community, you knew about it because they were covering the events. The St. Louis Argus, the St. Louis American, even the Evening World, WHIRL, was a gossip rag that Arsenio Hall brought on his show years ago.
Some of the best news, the gossip, man.
Listen, and I was repeating it to my beloved. I was like, listen, it was a little embarrassing if you was in it. You got caught up in it, right? If it was your family member that they was on. But let me just tell you, while it may have been kind of funny and it was kind of crude the way they brought the news, because they did go downtown and find the public record, and they would post the mugshot, and then they would tell the story about how you got arrested. And then if you were, if you had any kind of celebrity, if you was Reverend Doctor, or if you was, Your Honor, somebody, and you got yourself caught up.
You own the funeral home.
You own it. Yeah. You got caught up in a thing. They would do a poem. They would write a poem that had you at the center of it. Child, listen. So my point is, there were those ways in which we were talking to each other, and that we were we were informing each other, and we were having the dialogue amongst us, in the urban context, what was important to us in every urban center.
That's the
Yeah,
community I was talking about. That was
yeah,
the
that's exactly right. And that we were in this dialogues, we were in these conversations. Yes, at the barbershop and beauty shop. I was with my mama for years at Miss Ardell's. That's the beauty shop. hmm hmm And I'd get me one of them Fanta orange soda pops in the bottle. I'd beg my mama for a quarter until she would let me have. I could get one, so I wouldn't start begging.
a quarter. What year was this again?
This was back. It was a quarter. That's
Back in the day.
Yes, back in the day. That's right.
I remember the quarter too. I remember the quarter fake pop.
That's right.
Pop. Mine was
That's
red
right.
pop.
Red pop. But got it. I understand. And you put that in there, but I wouldn't beg until about half. We'd be about 2 hours into that 4-hour journey at the beauty shop. It was about because because I got that thing, it wasn't gonna last for about 15 minutes, and then I'm gonna be, so I had to pace it out. But I'd get the quarter, and I put it in the thing, pop that top off, and drink it as slow as I could, and listen to the conversations that were had. I was ear hustling, as the kids say now. Right, I was ear hustling, but how much of what I heard I was understanding in my formative years, that quite frankly we don't have those same spaces anymore. So we've got to create those spaces. And so I'm watching media, and Black media in particular. I'm listening to Sirius Radio and Urban View, and other spaces where and YouTube and some of these other ways in which we are we're working on being community for and with one another. We've got to have these kind of spaces, because at the end of the day, if we don't figure out how we take care of each other, the other folk ain't gonna take care of you like we can take care of us, right?
Yeah.
And so I am one, thankful that we can come on these airways and have just a few moments and say, what the, and also speak, talk through a little bit of what is important, both historically speaking. And I'd like to, we got to have many more conversations about what history has shown us about what happens when we forget to make the main thing the main things, right? That I'd love to have a conversation about the direction that the movement took when it made electoral politics the main thing, right? After Dr. King was assassinated, that was a shift turning, right? To the rally that occurred in Gary, Indiana, in 1972, where Mrs. King and Mrs. Shabazz were both there, and Jesse Jackson gave the keynote. 1972 in Gary, that political rally that I think that set in motion what occurred that night in November in 2008, when Barack Obama was elected president of the United States. I think there's a direct connection to that. At the same time, he dropped more bombs via drones, and we talk about mass deportation. Let's have that conversation, because it just didn't start with the orange man here. It didn't just start there. But anyway. But those are actual conversations that I think we ought to be having, because again, we got to talk about how do we support. I love, again, here's the last thing I'll say. Assata Shakur, during the movement, gifted us some words that the leaders in Ferguson, for me, helped us to remember. And in that, what Assata taught us, we must love each other and support each other, for we have nothing to lose but our chains. And therein lies, I think, the deep work and most profound work each of us has to kind of reckon with ourselves and make the decisions, daily almost, this is what I'm going to do, and this is how I'm going to serve. This is what I'm going to, invest time, energy, money, resources into. I appreciate you, brother, very much for coming on, chopping it up with me and my community.
Mhm.
And any last words you got that you'd
All I
like
can
to?
say is I tried my best to keep up with you tonight. I just tried my best. I feel good about the contribution I made to the conversation. I mean, you throw it out, you throw a lot out there, but I always feel good about coming on. I enjoy, having this opportunity to talk to you about these issues, these things that are really important, things that you care very deeply about, that I care very deeply about. You've been much more active and engaged at that grassroots level, in the community. I have done other things in other ways in terms of my own sort of involvement, but I mean, all of these things are really important, and I think, especially when I look at my students, when I'm sort of teaching them and thinking about the future and the world that we are handing off to them and the work that they have to do to clean up the mess that we are creating right now. Um,
Right.
and I just want, and I think programs like this for people who are listening, especially younger people who are listening, this could provide them with that motivation to carry this work forward, because we can't do this forever, man. I'm seeing a lot of grade, between the two of us. So, we gotta hand this off. We gotta, punt at some point, to the next group of people to do this work. And so, sharing these ideas and these thoughts and observations are part of what we have to do,
That's right. I
yeah.
appreciate it, brother. Obviously, I'm gonna ask you again when we can. I'd love to have you back again because there's more to talk about,
Right.
and it's more contributions you got on lots of this here. I appreciate you, brother. And I say to those who watch us and viewers, we get several hundred over the course of a week. In a few days' time. I appreciate you and your support. Like and share and do all the stuff you're supposed to do. I'm supposed to say like and share and thumbs up and all that stuff. Do all that stuff that you're supposed to do. And what we promise is that we'll be back here at the same bat channel, same bat time, or a little bit different. This live in most cases, and this is just homemade television. We're doing what it is that we do with the hack staff that we have, and appreciate all of those who help us do this thing that we do, and appreciate you and for watching. Appreciate you, brother Sekou, and blessings to you. We'll see y'all again next time. All right, peace.